Welcome to another one of those videos where I go through all 31 teams, and a bunch of people are going to skip to the end rather than listen to my explanations. There you go. So 31 teams, and we're at about the halfway mark, right? So 31 team MVPs as we get ready for the All-Star game. Team MVPs, and then we can have a discussion some other time about how many of them aren't going to the All-Star game and why. And I already mentioned in the News of the Day video today, the All-Star game is never going to be considered anything more than just an exhibition. It's not. It's a bigger deal to the fans than it is to the players. That's pretty clear. Anaheim, looking for an MVP for a team that's outside the playoffs could be more difficult than finding one for a team that's in the playoffs, right? And for Anaheim, I decided on John Gibson. When he's playing well, they've got a shot. When he's not, they're dead. They don't have the offense to overcome a bad game from Gibson at all. Arizona, it is hard to argue against, though he's hurt. Darcy Kemper. And I know Antti Raanta is a pretty good goaltender as well, but I would go with Darcy Kemper as their MVP so far, and I don't think there's very many Arizona fans that would argue against that. And you can make an argument for Schmaltz. I guess you could make an argument for Taylor Hall once he gets into the swing of things. He's currently sitting with 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points in 7 games with Arizona. Boston, honestly, there's a couple of ways I could have gone with this, but I can't argue against Pastrnak that strenuously. I could argue in favor of Marchand. Marchand, yes, it's close, but Pastrnak has been a pretty darn good all-around player this year. I know he's known for the goals, but his passing's been pretty on point as well. And he does provide a little bit of physical without crossing a line that Marchand does. Marchand takes a lot of penalties. Pastrnak takes his share as well, but I would still give him slightly the MVP. Buffalo, this is not close. There isn't anyone else I could argue stands with Eichel for Buffalo at all. There's nobody. Calgary was tough because they've been a disappointment for many parts of this season. And I'm going with Matthew Tkachuk as their best overall forward night in and night out. It should be Johnny Gaudreau. Part of the reason they're not first is because it's not Johnny Gaudreau. And I would love to have put up there Riddick or Monahan or Lindholm, but I think Tkachuk's been their best player this season. Carolina, I don't think Carolina fans are going to be surprised I put up Svechnikov, although it's close between him and Aho. Very, very close between him and Sebastian Aho, but I do feel like Svechnikov overall has been their best forward. And Teravainen, with all the assists he's putting up, he gets an honorable mention as well. There's a lot of different parts in Carolina that are working very well offensively. If they can get that consistent goaltending from either Mrazek or Reimer, whoever it's from, they're in good shape. But Carolina, yeah, Svechnikov for me has been their MVP. Chicago. There isn't really any other way to go with this, is there? It is Patrick Kane. There is no around there's no way around that. The Kane is the best. Colorado. I don't even know why I need to look at the book for Colorado. It's Nathan MacKinnon. So they've suffered injuries that most teams would be crippled by, and they're still in the playoffs. But if it was Nathan MacKinnon that went down, I think it probably would have been a different story. MacKinnon, especially to start the season, put the team on his back for that insane point streak to start the year. And he's still on pace for a lot of points. So he to me is their MVP. Columbus. Columbus is tricky too, because they don't have a big name scorer, really. Dubois, kind of, but Korpisalo has been their MVP. When Korpisalo plays well, they tend to win. If they win games, Korpisalo tends to be one of the 3 stars of that game. It's something I noticed early in the year, and that never really changed. This is why with Korpisalo hurt, now Columbus fans are like, okay, now we're dead. The thing is, Merzlikins last night wins a game. He's was he second All-Star? And he's second or third All-Star, and maybe he can help make up for Korpisalo being out, but he has been their MVP through the first half. Dallas, I had to go with a goaltender too. I had to go with Bishop, and I know there are people who would want to see Heiskanen in there. There are people who might argue Rope Hintz. Hintz had a lot of goals to start the year. Heiskanen hasn't. He's been very good, but has he consistently been the reason they win games when they do? No, that's been the goaltending. So, if anything, the honorable mention goes to Hudobin. Honestly, the honorable mention for me would go to Hudobin, because without Hudobin and Bishop, this team is done. If they had average goaltending, I don't know if this team's in a playoff spot. Detroit. Detroit's tricky as a team with 10 wins. I went with a player who's been injured for them, and Anthony Mantha. Mantha to start the season was playing very, very well. But because he's a Detroit Red Wing, you got to get hurt and you got to crash out, and Detroit's had a miserable year. But Mantha, to me, is as close to an MVP as they get. I know Bertuzzi's the one going to the All-Star game. I know he's played well this year, but I think Mantha's still their most valuable player through the first half of the year. Edmonton, this is a lot closer than it should be. We're not supposed to be talking about Draisaitl as potentially knocking McDavid out of that perch, but he very nearly did. Pretty darn close. So for McDavid, I still think he's their most valuable player, but if you want to make an argument for Draisaitl, you probably can. And this is one year where you can, but I think by the end of the season, I think McDavid will have distanced himself out, and then the question is going to be, is he the Hart winner or is he not? If this team makes the playoffs, I do think McDavid has an excellent chance at winning the Hart. Florida, this one's close too. So I know there's people who are going to say, well, Barkov, why isn't it Barkov? Because Huberdeau's been the better player. Huberdeau, especially over the last few weeks, he's been absolutely dynamite. So that I don't have a reason not to have Huberdeau as the MVP overall. Next up is LA. LA's not really that close either. I could have made an argument for Drew Doughty. I probably could have made an argument for Jeff Carter at certain points of the year, but overall it's still Anze Kopitar. For better, for worse, Anze Kopitar is still their best player. And no matter what happens with LA, whether they can make a push in the second half or not, it's all going to be tied to Kopitar and how he does. Minnesota, I ended up going with Minnesota. I kind of chickened out with Minnesota a little bit. I went with Stahl. It's between Stahl and Suter. Suter plays the minutes. The overall numbers with Suter, though, I don't think are as strong as Stahl. I do think that their turnaround was directly related to Stahl getting everything in gear and starting to score points like we know he can. Not like he always does, but we know he can. So I went with Stahl as their MVP. Montreal. Montreal was tricky. You can make an argument for Gallagher. You can make an argument for Tatar on some level. Tatar's overall defensive numbers aren't all that great. But Shea Weber, for me, has been an absolute beast for them. He has been fantastic. And when that trade took place years back between Montreal and Nashville, and you get Weber, and Subban was the other way. Everybody said Subban was younger, so this trade was a ripoff. The Weber contract was just insanely expensive. So Subban's the younger player. Subban's the guy who's got technically a better contract. What is Montreal thinking? And Weber also was considered kind of damaged goods at the time. He's already peaked. He's not going to be what he used to be. Yeah, he's pretty darn good, though. And for Subban, he's now been traded on to New Jersey from Nashville. And, right? So I don't think there's an argument to be made right now about who necessarily won that, because I don't think there's much of an argument to have, because Weber's been fantastic. Nashville. I don't know that Nashville has a close race for this either. I think it's Yossi. During the summer, I talked about how much I liked Yossi as a defenseman. There were people who said, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, because he's got Roman Yossi as one of the top 3 defensemen in the National Hockey League. I'm pretty sure I had him at number 2 overall. It's hard to argue he's not one of the best defensemen in the league right now. Dougie Hamilton, and John Carlson are having amazing offensive seasons. And here comes Victor Hedman, kind of planning on doing the same thing for Tampa. But Yossi has been insane. 7 goals in his last 10 games. He is fantastic, and his defense is just as good. So this is why the extension he signed, it might end up being a bad extension later on, but right now, it looks pretty good. With New Jersey, it's tricky. And I'm looking at who I picked for New Jersey, and you know what? I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it live. On air. I'm going to go ahead and say Mackenzie Blackwood. I had Vatanen. I had Vatanen because I think he's had a really good year, and I think it gets lost in amongst the New Jersey Devils' poor start. But you know what? Blackwood has had to play behind some pretty poor defense. He has won some games for New Jersey all by himself. And if he was capable of playing every single game, maybe New Jersey would be a lot closer to the playoffs than they are right now. So, yeah, I'll go with Blackwood. Islanders was one that I went back and forth on. I'll go with Matthew Barzal. I think whether these guys end up being top seeds or not is going to come down to Barzal. I think their goaltending is pretty darn good. I know Varlamov and Greiss have both put up really good numbers, but I do think that Barzal overall is their most valuable player. All right, as I try to hold off the sun and everything. Really bright out there today. Somebody cranked the sun up for 2020, I guess. But yeah, Barzal, and again, you can make arguments for other players. You could make an argument for Pelech and Pulock as co-MVPs on that blue line. But I'm going with Barzal as the overall MVP for the Islanders. If you want to go with Greiss or Varlamov more than likely over Greiss because of the way Greiss has played lately. I can't make the argument against it, really. For the Rangers, this has been insane. Artemi Panarin hasn't just picked up his play with the Rangers. He is having the best season of his career. This is a year that he will not be able to replicate. This is a year that's just absolutely insane, and it's for a team that may very well not make the playoffs. The chemistry that Strome and Panarin have together, it's one of those things that happens. You see it. We see it in Vancouver with Besser and Pettersson. The difference is it was kind of expected with Besser and Pettersson. Strome and Panarin, that wasn't expected at all. So people talk about the great season Strome's having. A lot of it has to do with the fact he's paired with Panarin, and they are just fantastic together. That one knows where the other one is on the ice. They can make those blind passes, and they work. So Artemi Panarin right now is on pace to completely shatter all of his career marks for goals and points and everything. And I don't know that it's close when it comes to who the most valuable player is for the Rangers. I think it's absolutely Panarin. He has been much better even than expected when he signed that massive contract in July. Ottawa, I'm going to go with Duclair, but Chabot, it's hard to argue against Chabot too. If I could co-MVP this, I would, but if I did that, then I'd have a bunch of other co-MVPs, and then I'm not kind of sticking my neck out with who I've picked. So I'll go with Duclair, but Chabot has been absolutely fantastic on that blue line. He's playing a crazy amount of time. And I thought about Nilsson as well. Nilsson's been one of the best goalies in the NHL at certain points in time for Ottawa, usually coinciding with winning streaks and their record getting better. But at the same time, Anderson's been pretty good while Nilsson's been out. So I went with Duclair. Philadelphia, this one was tough as well. I'm going with Konechny, but you can make an argument it's Carter Hart. You can make an argument for Carter Hart. You could also make an argument for Provorov. Provorov's had an amazing bounce-back season so far for Philadelphia. So I went with Konechny, who's near a point a game. And what I've said all along is that I still think that when Philadelphia is playing really well, their most valuable player is usually Sean Couturier. That Sean Couturier is the guy who decides whether they make the playoffs and how good they are in the playoffs, that kind of thing. Couturier, for me, has been their engine. Right now, I would say Konechny is their MVP. I'd be very surprised if at the end of the season, I'm not talking about a really strong second half that Couturier has, and him dragging them into a playoff spot. I'd be very surprised if it doesn't happen. Pittsburgh's tricky because there's been so many injuries. Yeah, I'm going to change this one too. I have to go with Malkin. I had Gensel, but I have to go with Malkin. In the wake of Sidney Crosby going down, and a lot of people going, well, that's it for Pittsburgh then, isn't it? Malkin's been a beast. And it reminds us all why Malkin was seen as one of the best players in the world at the time he was drafted, and he was seen as this huge star. And in Pittsburgh, let's be honest, he's been a massive star, but if he played almost anywhere else in the NHL, I think his star would be a lot brighter. I think he would have had a lot more prime opportunities. I think he would have had more points and goals and everything. I don't think it concerns him. I think he's perfectly happy with 3 Stanley Cup rings. I think he's perfectly happy being second fiddle to Sidney Crosby and not having that pressure. But Malkin has been absolutely fantastic for Pittsburgh when in the lineup. And that was part of it too, is that looking at it and going, well, who's been out and who hasn't? Well, Gensel was a constant until this most recent game where he gets hurt and he's out for the rest of the year. But I can't argue Gensel over Malkin. I can't. So I'll go with Malkin. San Jose. San Jose's tricky because, and I'm going to put up the question mark, Evander Kane. Evander Kane, upon returning from the suspension he had at the start of the year after that Vegas fracas, he was fantastic. The overall numbers in San Jose, there hasn't really been anybody who's taken over this team. Big part of the reason this team's struggling. I can't go with Burns. I don't think Burns' numbers have been as consistent as they need to be. I don't think Erik Karlsson has necessarily been their top guy. I know Couture's going to the All-Star game. I understand that Couture is their number one scorer overall. But I think Evander Kane's been their MVP. This has not been a great year. It has been a miserable year for San Jose. And so that's why I have Kane with a question mark. Because I guess Evander Kane, I guess. St. Louis, this one's tricky too. I can't give it to Binnington because Allen's been really good too. And Allen's played a lot of games. I thought about Pietrangelo as well. I thought about Ryan O'Reilly. I'm going with Perron. Perron's been sort of a leader of this team. More for points than we might have expected. He's having a fantastic season, and so far I would go with Perron as their MVP. I know he's not going to the All-Star game. I know that's one of those names that's out there that people are like, why? But guaranteed, with the amount of points he's putting up with how he's playing, he's going to enjoy having that weekend off. So for Perron, I give him the MVP, but I think one of the wonderful things about St. Louis is that there are so many different players that you could put up there, and I would have a hard time arguing against it. Shen would be one of them. O'Reilly, obviously. Pietrangelo. Parayko. You could argue Colton Parayko. So, I went with Perron. Tampa Bay. Hedman started scoring, and the team started winning. Hedman started looking like Hedman. The team started winning. I think he's their most valuable player. I thought about Stamkos. I thought about Kucherov. Kucherov's still on pace for about 90 points this year. But I can't put anybody but Hedman up there and feel good about it. So I'm going with Hedman as the guy for Tampa Bay. Toronto's tricky too because there's a lot of guys. Right now, Nylander is making a run for that as well. I know Toronto fans are going to say Freddie Anderson. And I understand why Toronto fans are going to say Freddie Anderson. But I think Freddie Anderson, while he's been good, I don't think he's been spectacular. He's been very good. Don't take offense. But I think Auston Matthews, on pace for about 53, 54 goals potentially, I think he's been fantastic. Auston Matthews before this season, all anybody was talking about was how he didn't get captain, and that incident that took place in Arizona is probably why, and this guy's this and he's that, and there was a lot of negative talk about Matthews. That's gone. And what he's been able to do this season so far has been nothing short of remarkable. That charge in Arizona's gone, so we don't have to worry about that at this point. And I bring it up because there are players who would have been distracted by all that off-ice stuff. He wasn't. He went out there and he did his job. And he has been absolutely fantastic. I don't think he needs the captaincy. I think it's good that Tavares has it. I could have made an argument on this board for Freddie Anderson. Like I said, I think most Maple Leaf fans believe that Freddie Anderson's the MVP. I think with Anderson, I think it's more of an indictment of the backups that have been in place. than it is a statement of how great Anderson's been. I think you look around at a lot of the teams in the league that have good goaltending, they usually have two good goaltenders. And I think for Toronto, it's been an indictment of whether it's Hutchinson or Kaskasuo, whoever's in there, as much as it's any kind of an endorsement that Freddie Anderson's fantastic. I do think Matthews has been consistently excellent throughout the season. Vancouver, I went back and forth, and you know what? I'm gonna put the obvious one up here because he has been the MVP. Pettersson's been fantastic. He's as advertised. He's on pace for about 85 points, but JT Miller has been so much more than advertised, and he has been pretty darn near a point a game. And what he's added to that top six has been fantastic. And it's also revealed that the Canucks could probably use one more guy. Now, that being said, Tanner Pearson's also got 27 points in the first half of the year. He's on pace for 54. There are a lot of guys in Vancouver right now having pretty darn good seasons offensively. I could have put up Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes is a rookie. He's playing a lot of big minutes. His defensive numbers have seemingly lagged a little bit in the second quarter compared to the first quarter, but he's been excellent. I went with Pettersson because still, Elias Pettersson is fantastic. He is everything that he was advertised to be before he came over, and he's been awesome. So I went with Pettersson. I considered Besser as well, to be honest. Horvat on the road, but overall I went with Pettersson. Vegas is kind of easy, kind of not. It is hard to argue against Stone. I guess you could argue Pacioretty. And everybody knows how much I like William Karlsson. He may not score the points like Stone, but man, is a 200-foot beast. That being said, Stone is their most valuable player. Nate Schmidt gets an honorable mention here because when he's in the lineup, their record seems to be a lot better than when he's not. And of course, Marc-Andre Fleury for everything he's been going through personally this year. The fact that he's still putting up some pretty good numbers is fantastic. But yeah, I go with Stone. Washington. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to change this one too. I'll go with John Carlson. And yet, Ovechkin, it's hard to argue against Ovechkin. It's hard to argue against Kuznetsov at points. I'll go with Carlson as the MVP of the first half for the Washington Capitals. But yeah, that one's tough. There's been a lot of players playing pretty darn well for the Capitals, which is how their record got to be so gaudy at this point in the season. And we'll see whether or not Carlson is able to hit 100 points. I say no. In this day and age, a defenseman hitting 100 points is really, really difficult. And his scoring has fallen off over the last 20 games compared to what it was the first 20. So I'll say no with Carlson, but he is their MVP. Just not a 100-point player, but there's very few 100-point players in the National Hockey League these days. Although more this year than we've seen recently. But Carlson. Winnipeg, I went back and forth. I thought, you know what, Scheifele was the first name that came to mind for me. But how many games has Hellebuck won that he had no business winning? How many times have the Jets won a game where you've scratched your head at the end of the night and said, the only reason they did that is because of Hellebuck? And then you look at Brossoit's numbers, they haven't been great. This is where Toronto fans will say, well, Freddie does that too. Yes, but Matthews is just fantastic. And there hasn't really been anybody from Winnipeg who's been consistently fantastic. Laine had that amazing start. He's still at a point a game, but I wouldn't give him MVP. Kyle Connor with the hat trick last night, absolutely fantastic run for him. He's on pace for 40 goals. I wouldn't give him necessarily team MVP either. And Scheifele overall has been their best point producer, but to me it's Hellebuck. There have been just too many games where they've won that they shouldn't have because of Hellebuck. But that's my 31 MVPs. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. Welcome to 2020. Let me know who you think is going to be on the board at the end of the year as the MVP for all 31 teams. And yeah, I'll probably look again at the end of the year, and we'll see how things change. Thank you guys so much. I will talk to you again soon.